Hi guys, Arthur here from Homeowner DIY. In this video, I'm going to figure out why the brake pads in the 2001 Buick Regal are wearing unevenly. Now, originally I thought it was a warped rotor, but after checking all four rotors, none of them are warped. I did realize that the driver's side brake pads for the front and back are wearing unevenly, while the passenger side are not. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take apart the brakes and we're going to look at the possible causes. So if you run into an issue like this, at least you'll have a reference to go off of. So what we'll do now is material and tools. Alright, this is our material list. So I have penetrating fluid, brake cleaner, grease, some rags, and then gloves. Guys, this is what I need on this job. So what we'll do now is the tools list. Alright, this is the tools list. So I have my sockets in the back. I have impact sockets, a 1/2-inch impact, earplugs, steel brush, torque wrench, small flathead screwdriver, a jack, and instead of jack stands, I'm going to be using a couple blocks because I don't need to raise the car for very long. Now guys, real quick, with the torque wrench, it's optional. I mean, if you change a tire by the side of the road, you're not going to have one. But since I have one, I'm going to use it when I put the tires back on the car. Guys, this is the tools that I need for this job. So let's get started. Alright, so to leave the transmission in neutral, since this is an automatic, we have our shifter. We're currently in park. So now it's in neutral. And then I'm just going to shut off the engine. So now the car is in neutral, so the front wheels will spin freely. Also, be sure to make sure that the emergency brake is on so the car doesn't roll anywhere, or you can always shock the wheels. Alright guys, this is the left driver's side, so you can see it's the same type of pitting as that happened last time. So I think the reason that this is happening on this side and not the other side is because this car is parked mostly on the street and it's not driven all that much. So with that in mind, I think a lot of the times when cars drive by, it splashes water onto the rotors, and that's why there's pitting and less wear on this side than it is on the other side. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this tire here. We're going to take the tire off and then spin the rotor and see if this one is warped or not. Alright, so I turned the tire outward to make it easier to look down the line when I spin the rotor. So I'm going to take the metal cap off. Well, as you can see, these things are broken off because the plastic is old and brittle. Alright, the lug nuts are 19 millimeters, so I'm just going to loosen them off. And go in a star pattern. Alright, so I'm going to jack it at this point here. I think every car has a jacking point at this location just behind the front tire. So I'm going to raise the car up, and then I'm going to grab a couple blocks and I'm going to put them in behind just in case if something happens with the jack, I'm not going to drop the car on its rotor. Alright, so the car is in neutral, so the tire spins. So now I'm going to take the lug nuts off. Alright, so I'm going to take some penetrating fluid and give the bolt a quick shot. Give it maybe 10 minutes just to allow it to soak in before you take out the caliper slide pin bolts. Alright, so these two bolts are 15 mil. Okay, so looking at our two bolts, the top one has a groove or something at the very top. Is slightly different. Always make a note of the sizes and lengths of the bolt, so you make sure that you put it back in the same spot. Alright, so this is our caliper. I'm not going to use a bungee cord for this because I don't think I'm going to need to. So take note how the outside, there's almost nothing left, and the inside has a whole ton left. Which is probably not a good sign. Alright, so that'll stay there. Alright, so I'm going to spin the rotor, but I'm going to throw on a couple lug nuts to help hold this in place. So this is the pin from the passenger side. There's nothing that really jumps out as any issue. But I didn't have a problem with the passenger side, I had a problem with the driver's side. So this is the bottom pin, and for this car, this is the top pin. The top pin has this little section here, but we'll take note on how the caliper slide pins are nice, smooth. There's no rust or anything like that. So guys, make sure to grease these back up before you reinstall them. Alright, when it comes to the caliper, so first thing is we're looking for, is anything leaking? I don't see anything. Is anything leaking in the back? No, it is rusty and crusty, but it doesn't look like there's any issue. To test the piston to see if it seized, just take a C-clamp and put it on, just like if you're replacing your brake pads. If it's really stiff, you may have a seized caliper. Mine, there was no issue with it being stiff. So looking at our pins, they look the same as the opposite side. I don't see any corrosion or any damage. Now, the one thing that I did notice, I don't remember if it was the front or the back, that the pins were dry. The grease was gone. But this is your opportunity to check to make sure everything is functional and you have no issues. Now, I didn't notice anything glaring that jumped out at me. Now, what I did do was I did flip the rotor. So this is the rotor from the passenger side. That's why it's all nice and shiny. The opposite side is now the rusty side. The reason I did that is I might as well just have the two rust together at the same time. But everything looks here to be okay. There's nothing glaring at me. If you guys want to see, that is what the passenger side pad looks like. It looks brand new, just like the inside of this side. The other one, you can barely see this line right here, which means all this material is gone on that side. But the strange thing is I didn't notice any dragging or anything like that. I thought it was a warped rotor because I just hear this kind of chicking sound, like chick, chick, chick. Only when the brakes were applied, but otherwise everything here looks to be okay. I've already greased here. I've greased the wings and everything else, so I don't need to redo this. So if you do have issues getting the caliper back on, just use a C-clamp. I don't need to because I did this already and I put everything back together. But what we'll do is we'll grease our pins. And remember, you just need a skim coat. You don't need a big glop of it. It's actually not good to have too much grease when it comes to your braking system because it works off of friction. So for the bushings, make sure that they're nice and tight up to the end of the caliper. Not that they're pinched or anything like that. The last thing you want is debris, grime, and anything else to get inside here. So the top and bottom both look fine. So I'm going to throw the tire back on, and then we're going to look at the rear tire on this same driver's side. Alright, so these bolts are 14 millimeter. Alright, so same thing as the front. The outside was worn down. The rotor here was all rusty. I flipped the rotors. You can see the end of the studs, how rusty they are. And this is because there was no cover here, and water as cars drive by keep splashing. But what we're going to do is the same thing, is we're going to inspect our caliper. Nothing is leaking here. Nothing is leaking here. You can once again do the C-clamp test. Push this in. If it slides in, then that means the caliper is not seized. Alright, so these are our caliper slide bolts. Again, this is the top one. It has the ring. So I don't see any corrosion or anything that jumps out at me. I mean, this car's not driven all that much. These look fine. I've already tested everything. I've made sure everything is good to go. There's grease on the pads. There's grease. I've redone this. I believe this one was the one that was dry, and maybe that was the issue. Once again, check the grommets to make sure that they're fine, that there is no issue. But I don't notice anything here that is jumping out at me being a problem. Alright, so we'll reinstall the caliper. Guys, make sure that you don't stress the flexible brake line, and also make sure that you don't pinch the rubber grommets. So just give it a little bit of grease once again, rinse and repeat as last time. Alright, so I'm going to get the tire back on, then I'm going to take the car for a test drive, and we'll see if we notice anything. Otherwise, that is it for this job. So, assuming everything's okay, what I'll do is I'll review this job. Alright guys, so that concludes this job. So when it comes to uneven brake wear, I think the most common issues you're going to come across is a collapsed or blocked brake line, the flexible brake line, a seized caliper, or the caliper slide pin bolts that are either worn out or they need to be relubricated. Now, this car isn't driven very much, but based on the two sides, there's like 10% left, so I'm glad that I caught this now. Guys, I've said this so many times before, if you notice an issue, go and address it right away, because you can create more damage later on. If I left this, I'd be replacing the rotors as well, because the backing for the brake pad would have made contact with the rotor, just scarring it and destroying it. The time on this job. The time was about 7 hours, and that includes me going around all the tires, taking the brakes apart, and checking them. Now, because I don't have an automotive shop, I don't have a hoist. Guys, this is not complicated, but it's going to be time consuming, because you have to go tire by tire, lift the car up, inspect, drop it down, go to the next one. An automotive shop will just lift the whole thing up and off they go. Also, one thing to keep in mind, if the brakes haven't been worked on in a while, it's going to be tough to take the bolts out because of rust and debris. Since I just did this the previous day when I did my diagnosis, everything was easy to take apart, but be prepared for stuff that is rusted together and a pain to get apart, because it's been a while if you don't do regular maintenance on your car. the cost of this job. The cost was, I guess, technically free. The brake cleaner, penetrating fluid, and the grease I already had. I think in this type of case, the labor is what's going to get you, not the actual material needed to fix the issue. The slide pin bolts look fine, and it should. I mean, the car only has 180,000 kilometers, 110,000 miles on it, so it's not used all that much, but I think it's because it's parked on the street, and as cars drive by when it's raining and splashing water, that is why there is the problem on one side and not the other. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. I hope something here is going to help you on your project when you need to go ahead and do that. Guys, until next time, please hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next project.